introduce my friend Jake Brewer, who currently leads the external affairs team at change.org, where he works to remake the relationship between decision makers and the 50 million change users who start and sign public petitions. He's going to talk about the problem with petitions and rethinking how we build digital democracy. He's also serves as strategic director and co-founder of Define American, where his work has included reframing the narrative of the immigration debate in media and culture. And he's worked with the White House on veteran employment and with Code for America. His resume is really unbelievable and unparalleled, and I'm thrilled that he's going to be on this stage in about 5 seconds.
Thank you very much. All right. Hey, there's me. This is really exciting for me. As Liba said, I've been thinking about how do you really make democracy work more effectively for about 10 years now, and tried some things that worked a little bit, and mostly, tried a bunch of things that didn't work. And about a year ago, I came to change.org for a lot of reasons, but one is there's about 75 million users now who start and sign 1,200 petitions every day, and it basically has created a laboratory for what democratic exchange can look like. This is just a ton of data. If you're somebody who geeks out with all the different numbers and ways that things work or don't work, then it was an amazing opportunity to come and really think through one of the world's biggest platforms for doing this effectively and creating a different type of relationship between citizens and the people who make decisions that impact their lives. And so one of the questions we are most interested in as not only a company, but also just as a group of people that are most critically concerned with making people's voices matter is, do petitions work? And the short answer is that unequivocally, yes. Petitions do and very often work. They are great for all kinds of things every single day. There are petitions that span things from life-changing issues to life-saving issues. People get access to life-saving drugs they wouldn't have otherwise had, to really silly things. In some cases, one of my favorite petitions of all time was to the Detroit Lions, the NFL football team, asking them not to allow Nickelback to play the halftime show of the Thanksgiving Day game. 60,000 people did not want Nickelback to play. They still played, unfortunately, but I was pretty excited that there was at least an effort to make that not happen. So they work. I mean, we know that they work at scale at this point. We've just demonstrated that again and again. Every day there's dozens of new victories, and we couldn't be more excited about those. And we can make them work a lot better. Democracy has definitively also not fulfilled the promise of what the internet was going to bring us when it came along. Anybody's voice can be raised, and now we have the ability to make that truly matter, and we haven't yet gotten there. And so what I'm excited about with this particular crowd is that we have, as a new generation, as a group of people that have access to tools that we've never had access before in human history, to now seize the opportunity to rebuild our relationship with these folks. Quickly, I want to go through a little history here. This is the entire history of innovation with the petition. And petitions are, in many ways, a proxy for democracy. It's one of the most common forms of act or action that people take in the democratic process. They sign something, whether they start something and get others to sign it, or they sign and they join in with others to say, this is something that we care about. The petition on the left is from 1688. It was a Quaker petition to end slavery, one of the first examples of the petition in the Americas. And the next is, again, the major innovation is when it went from being offline to online, which was when MoveOn started in 1998, or roughly around that. And that really is about the biggest difference. Now, what we have gotten a lot better at is making petitions go way bigger, way faster. They are going to more parts of the world. They're targeted and sent to more types of people. This is not just about government. But in general, we really haven't changed hardly anything yet. And we have an opportunity to do that. The result, in many ways, is that the bigger and faster the velocity and the scale that we've reached is actually creating more noise often. So this is a pretty big problem we now have to overcome when it comes to making democracy work better. The internet has created huge megaphones, the biggest megaphone of all time, whether that's through Tumblr or Facebook or Twitter or any of the different tools you use, change.org, of course. What that does is it often creates so much noise that the people on the receiving end can't hear anything. And we need to make that work more effectively as well. So it's time to start thinking about the headphones and not just the megaphone. And this is not a new conversation. So a bunch of people that I kind of call out here, going back, again, about a decade. This is not new stuff. This is not a conversation that doesn't have a lot of background. Everybody from the White House to studies of Capitol Hill, and thinking about companies and customer service as a democratic exchange is also something that other people have been thinking about. And what we've got now, we think, oh, it's a little off, are new principles for digital democracy, something that is not just about identifying the problems, but actually offering up a new solution. So this, in essence, is a proposal that we're asking everybody here and other places around the world to join us in helping to make work more effectively. And the first principle, oh goodness, I got quite jumbled. This is what we call the victory pipeline. So kind of going down through here, people have an experience, they see something they want to change, they have a care or concern, and they start a petition to somebody who can do something about that. As they go down through, they ask people to sign with them, they potentially escalate in the media, and the more people see of this, the more that they want to do. It makes a lot of sense. The thing that's been most interesting, though, is that as these tools have grown, as Facebook has grown and Twitter has grown, and hashtags are sending lots and lots of messages all at once to a group, we're not really thinking about how the person on the receiving end is able to engage as well. It's all about how we speak at decision makers and not how we work with decision makers. So the first principle that we need to change is working with leaders in government and in companies and really anybody who's going to make a decision, not just at them. The second is that accountability is not just about government. When we think about democracy, it's not the case any longer that government is the only group that has a responsibility to be listening to us. It won't surprise anybody, I don't think. If you're truly surprised, please raise your hand. That companies have as much influence in our lives and in our communities as the government does. Anybody want to refute that? Okay. So we need mechanisms to hold them democratically accountable as well. And when we think about government, we need to stop thinking about just the Capitol Hills in the United States or the parliamentary bodies around the world that would be the traditional recipients. This is also local. Anybody who's in elected office that can represent you or does represent you is somebody that you should be able to have this type of exchange with. Another principle is actually creating a positive experience for the people who are going to be the decision makers on the thing you want to change. Imagine this, right? Imagine if it didn't just totally suck for the person who is getting a message from you. There's a great breakdown. If you think about being in, let's say, Congress, your mayor's office, work often with the mayor's office here in Chicago, and all the different messages that they get are basically just people getting quite angry with them and not actually giving them a real opportunity to engage very often. If we design the systems and we really think through this in a better way and make it positive, they're more likely to do the thing that we actually want. It's crazy as an idea, I know, but we think it'll work a little bit better. Interviews show this again and again. One of the first ways, by the way, is to actually just talk to them like real people who might want to work with you and not call them things like targets, which we were moving through. Another principle here is that our advocacy needs to be as transparent as the expectations that we put on government or companies to be as well. So I used to work at the Sunlight Foundation. I don't know if anybody's familiar with that. Worked with a lot of people in this room around bringing more transparency and accountability into government. And that's great. We really need that. We need more information around things like campaign financing and who's influencing who through money and exchanges of information and you name it. We need that. We also then need to be transparent about how we're behaving on the outside trying to influence these bodies. So if you think about it, if you make a phone call to Comcast asking them to change your service or you have a problem, the only person that knows you've made that call is you and the person on the other end of the line, most likely. They're not sharing that information. They're not, it's not available to a journalist to see that you've made this call. But there could also be, and often is, hundreds of other people making the exact same type of phone call that you could be joining with if you knew that they were doing this too. That a journalist could observe and say, wow, there's 500 people in this neighborhood who have this problem with Comcast, and Comcast needs to do something about it. I'm going to give them a call, and I'm going to create accountability through the media that way. Or I'm going to create accountability through numbers that are publicly available. And the same thing is true with government. If you make a phone call or you write a letter or an email to your mayor or your member of Congress, then you and the probably 24 to 28-year-old young person who's not necessarily trained to do anything with your letter is then supposed to, it's not obvious that other people can join you. So we need to make our efforts as transparent as we expect those to be. The other one, and this is the hard one, this is the hard one for a lot of activists and advocacy folks, is that we're not actually always right. A lot of times, in fact, we're often not right. Starting a petition or asking other people to join you doesn't mean the thing that you ask for is inherently the exact right solution to the problem. And again, it's easier to say than kind of to put into practice for yourself. But the petition, and I'll just tell you what it is because I see people squinting. Don't try to read it, it's okay. The petition on the left is one of my favorites of some of the testing that we've been doing at Change recently, which is around allowing people to just simply respond, a very, very simple function that has never been possible before with online petition systems. So a public response from the person who receives the petition. This is from the American Red Cross, the chief medical officer of the American Red Cross, so pretty high-level person representing an international NGO. And the petition to them asked the Red Cross to allow gay men to donate blood. And they've not been able to do this for about 2 decades or a little bit longer. And the chief medical officer of the Red Cross said, I agree with you. And it was, of course, a little bit surprising to the petition starters. We totally agree. In fact, we think they should be allowed to be able to donate blood. It's actually not our decision. This is a decision of the United States Food and Drug Administration. And so now the petition starter, who was wrong in the first place about what the Red Cross wanted, has an ally in the chief medical officer of the Red Cross and can now more appropriately target that petition to the right place and actually get something done and create a real solution where it needs to be versus where they thought it needed to be. The other example I just love because it's kind of fun, but it's also a good example of sometimes our activism or the act of just organizing a lot of people doesn't make it right. So Jimmy Wales, the founder of Wikipedia, got petitioned to allow a certain type of scientific article to be on Wikipedia, and he essentially he literally called them a lunatic in the petition response, which was probably not very polite, but from his perspective, 6 months ago or a year ago, he wouldn't have been able to just say, look, just because you have 8,000 people who want this doesn't mean it's the right thing per se. So being able to allow for those possibilities are really important. The other final and maybe most important principle as we rebuild democracy with all these digital tools is that don't create the expectation that citizens need to understand the halls of government and the management structures of all the companies. It's not about how we put more of our citizen voices in to that system. It's about how we bring those decision makers out to where we already are and make them work on our terms, not necessarily make us try to figure out in some way what their terms are. And this is a really pretty big fundamental shift that we need to start working through and quickly. Twitter, Facebook, Tumblr have done a great job of this, and now we need to apply that same kind of thinking in terms of engagement on those tools to the actual mechanisms of democracy. So turning those principles into reality is something that we're trying. Again, this is an experiment, it's new, and again, need help with. One of the ways is thinking through what we call Yelp of decision makers, or kind of building that type of idea. We need to be incentivizing decision makers to be out there where we are, like we just said, and creating positive opportunities for them to engage, and in some cases do it in a slightly involuntary way. If you're a small business, you don't get to choose whether you are in Yelp or not, but you can create a positive opportunity by engaging there. The second is direct responses. We want people to be in direct conversation with each other about the issues that matter versus being filtered through the media. The San Francisco mayor's office recently was describing what their former type of response was, which is if they wanted to respond to a big petition or any type of democratic input from their citizenry, they'd put out a press release. But the problem with many problems with press releases, but one of them is that people don't read them. So if you're trying to communicate back to the people who are communicating to you, and you put out something that you're almost guaranteed is not going to be read, that's a really bad exchange. We just need to change it. And then surfacing local engagements through the data we have is really exciting. So here's just a couple quick examples of testing that we've been doing so far over the course of the last year. This is an example with Senator Mitch McConnell from Kentucky. What I love about this is he responded to a petition. Again, the first time he's able to just simply put out the response to the exact people who had been writing to him. And he got thanked for it. the act of gratitude in the democratic exchange is critically important, and it's not something we've ever built into the systems that we need to run this. Secondly, I love this one from Southwest Airlines, which basically said, we're not going to do the thing you want us to do right away, but we hear you. There's quite a few of you that there's 31,000 of you that want us to do this thing. This thing in this particular case was stop promoting SeaWorld on their planes. This came out after the movie Blackfish was released last year. And Southwest basically said, we've got a long-standing relationship. We're working through this. We want you to know that we're working through this. So actually providing transparency into their process to these 30,000 people that wanted that. And then probably one of my favorites of the last couple of months has been this response from IKEA. And they were petitioned to withdraw their sponsorship of the Sochi Olympics a couple months ago. And they wanted them to withdraw because of these pretty awful anti-LGBT laws in Russia. And IKEA said, we're not going to withdraw our sponsorship, but here's why. The reason we're not going to withdraw is because we love our LGBT staff, we love our LGBT customers, and we think it's more important to espouse those values in a place where they're not getting that love and we're not seeing that demonstrated. And so we are going to go in there and we're just going to be very clear that this is what we stand for. And that, again, wasn't what the petition's starters wanted them to do, but it was a really pretty incredible response. And just kind of taking a step back, and we're thinking through all these different things we've built. We've built, again, biggest megaphones, biggest, most amazing tools ever created in human history. This is like an anthropologically different moment for citizenry. It's a different moment for society that we are literally at the very beginnings of. And we have this opportunity. We've created this kind of factory of democracy. My dad ran a factory in Tennessee, a car factory. And it was interesting, he'd always talk about when the factory's broken. And when the factory's broken, you don't put in more materials into the broken factory. You don't put better materials in. You rebuild the factory so that the product is better. And we have a moment here where we have an opportunity to increase that timeline and actually innovate in a brand new way that's never been done before. And we think these principles are a good way to start, and we hope you'll help. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Jake.
Thank you. Just sit on the couch and wait for it. It's very exciting.
Yeah. Sorry to make you
One of
wait.
my favorite people, by the way. This is fun.
It is fun. Welcome to our little fireside chat, where Jake and I get to, talk about whatever we want to talk about.
Yeah.
So I know to some extent this was part of the framing just in being here. You're talking about the next generation of digital democracy, but I just want to make it really explicit. How does all of this relate to millennials, to this audience that we're talking to and about? And maybe you can talk a little bit about, the demographics of the folks who use change.org, but also about kind of the future.
Yeah, it's really exciting to just get to work with young people pretty often, because that's just who is so used to using these types of tools, so just natural. The phrase digital native was part of a lot of the morning conversation today. And that expectation that nativism brings is what we need in order to influence the cultural shifts that are required for a lot of this to work more effectively. And so millennials coming into spaces like government, which Justin talked about, and actually just like saturating those institutions with their expectations and their behaviors and just the cultural dynamics that they've developed just naturally in a new age needs to now permeate all those other institutions. So really excited to see that happen.
Right, so imagine what will happen with the two-way conversation when millennials are in positions of executive authority and in government or the corporate world. That's going to be very exciting. And how much does it matter to the decision makers who are engaging or who will engage on change, whether or not these young people who are expressing their opinion through the petition process are actually voters or consumers of their product, and to what extent do you see people who are participating in this process also being the ones who are actually invested versus kind of people who've read about it in the press and jump on it? Does that matter?
Matters entirely. And so being able, when we talk about scale, we often talk about big numbers. And I think what's actually most interesting about scale is small numbers. So it's not just about your ability to have a 100,000 person petition that's sent to Congress where, if you're, let's say Elizabeth Warren or Mitch McConnell, either one, those 100,000 people, only a very small percentage of them actually matter to you, no matter what your influence on the whole body of Congress is. What's most interesting is actually getting people to be aware of who the decision makers are in their communities at a very small level. So we talk about victories and people winning things and creating solutions. The most interesting ones are like from, I got a report this morning, from like Dothan, Alabama, and a mother being able to start a conversation, really, a back and forth with the supervisor of a local school board. Or Duluth, Minnesota, we had one recently, which was a petition, and it ended up being a back and forth about the sheriff's office and some of the practices that they had. And it was just extremely local. It mattered to 50 to 100 people, but it really mattered to those 50 or 100 people, and that's what we're working on, and hopefully we'll do a lot more of.
Well, and this brings me to one of the audience questions that's quite popular, which is what percentage of online petitions achieve their desired result? Or at least, I guess you can speak to those on Change. I don't know if you can speak to online petitions in general.
Yeah, I can't speak to all the other times and places that people do this. So the most important metric to us, we talk about user numbers, we talk about traffic numbers, but the number of people who actually experience a solution is the most important number. And so we've got just under 75 million total users, and 25 million of them have at some point in some way experienced a solution through a petition. So about 1/3 of the people who have kind of engaged are doing that. And so that's usually the number we end up looking at, like the total number of petitions. There's all kinds of different issues around effectiveness and how they were started, and et cetera, et cetera. But,
and how do you define a solution?
Yeah, it's user declared, right? So was this a satisfactory outcome for you is something that we often look at. And then those are, we do make sure that there's not totally egregious declarations of those things.
Sure, but potentially like, the IKEA response that you showed might be satisfying to someone who...
Exactly, yeah. So the users in those cases, they have declared that that was great, and they are satisfied with their petition. Yeah.
Another audience question, which I think is a really interesting one, is about how much do you need the media to help you win in the online petition world? And I guess that's, the broader theme is the sort of ecosystem, echo chamber. You have a platform, but also you need people to know what's on the platform, and how does that symbiotic relationship work? And
it's a critical it is symbiotic. So it is, without the media, often things will not move. And probably the most critical strategic difference in the last couple of years of building Change.org specifically was this emphasis on making sure that journalists and bloggers and local media, local TV station producers, local radio, all of these have access to the stories that are happening right around them and are able to surface them, because that does create the necessary pressure. That was kind of part of that victory pipeline that got a little garbled there. But without that step, it doesn't quite escalate to the point where a decision maker feels the pressure that is necessary.
And you talked about the user experience for the decision maker. Do you focus on the user experience for the journalist as well?
We will do much more of that. Yes, we'd like to spend a lot more time there. As we are still a startup, so as even with Tumblr, no matter how many engineers you have, there's always a list of things you're not doing yet as well as you'd like, and we are going to focus a lot more on that.
We're perfect. I don't know what you're talking about. Why is, you talked a little bit about the need for people to understand who their decision makers are, and you sort of alluded to the fact that people tend to focus on federal level, national level decision makers and big corporations, and maybe aren't focusing on local so much, but I know that's where a lot of the successes have been. Yeah. Why is local so hard? I mean, this is a bigger question than just about petitions, but you have a broad perspective on this. Sure. From a lot of your work, and I care about this, and I think people do
I think
too.
a lot of people do.
Yeah.
I actually think people, when you start talking about it, they care about it way more. It's not something that we are driving collectively as a community as the conversation that's necessary. So one of my good buds named Ben Berkowitz, he built an application called See-Click-Fix. And the thing that it really started doing was allowing you to geotag where a pothole was and sending that data directly to the local Department of Transportation so they could fill it. And we often joke that potholes are the gateway drug to civic engagement.
Totally.
And
there's the daily pothole.
Totally true.
New York City does a daily pothole blog on Tumblr that's also super successful. It's kind of fascinating.
Exactly. It's kind of amazing. People love this stuff. And there's blogs that talk about the local issues that pop up in the sheriff's department, where a hawk ate a rabbit, and the sheriff went out to go clear the rabbit from the road, and it was because somebody reported it. And it might not matter to anybody else except this one person, but that data is available now. And I think the investment in the tools that are as addictive as all the other tools that we've built to share photos and share our thoughts and our food and all the different things that we do, if we made our democracy tools as addictive as we've made all these other tools, I think we'd get somewhere a lot more powerful.
Or if we can use those tools in service of democracy at the same time.
Which I think we can do. Right?
Which I think we're working on that. Yeah. I mean, we have like 20 seconds left, and this question just got voted up, and you're definitely not going to be able to answer it in 20 seconds. So I'm just going to ask it, and then you can answer it on Tumblr afterwards. Which is a question that's also near and dear to my heart about slacktivism. Can you comment on the concept of slacktivism and whether you feel it is a uniquely millennial trait, and if so, how do you change it? We're going to leave it at that because we have 4 seconds. So good luck answering that one. Maybe you can answer it with an animated GIF.
I can answer
somehow.
it in many ways. It's not. I'll just say first, short answer. It's not uniquely millennial.
You heard it here first.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Jake.